Thank you everyone for joining us here today. This is a talk on the junior doctor contract. It's as part of our FY1 survival tips webinar series. We've designed this webinar session because, first of all, congratulations on finishing medical school. But we've also identified gaps throughout the years in knowledge just before starting foundation year training. Things that medical school don't really teach you about. So we'll be covering those through our future webinars as part of these series. Keep an eye out for future sessions on the Mind the Bleep Facebook page and the Meadow page as well. So for today's talk, we'll be on the junior doctor contract. It's run in collaboration with OSCE Easy. And we have Dr. Cyra Asher. She's an academic foundation doctor working in the Oxford Deanery. So without delay, I hand you up to Dr. Cyra Asher.
Hi everybody, thanks for your patience. I'm so sorry for the delay, had some technical difficulties. So we will jump straight in. There's not really been that any changes really since the contract was introduced. So we'll go through the basics. Pop your questions in the chat as we go along and I'll answer them at the end. And yeah, let's get into it. So next slide, please. Thank you. Bit of a little talk on pay erosion. I'm sure we're all aware we're on our third strike coming up. Well, we're on our third strike today. So this is about pay erosion. Doctors' pay has been cut in real terms. And just thought I'd sort of remind you that that's going on. And there's a post on at the Finance Medic on Instagram that sort of details a bit more about what pay erosion is and how it works. And so if you wanted to find out a bit more about that, go and have a look. Next slide, please. So next slide. Thank you. So we're going to be talking about England because England has adopted the 2016 junior doctor contract. Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland has its own, but Scotland and Wales are on the old 2002 contract. You can find out a lot about that contract on the BMA website. And it's a little bit different from ours because the old contract still has bandings. And so ours is different in England, and I'll explain why as we go forward. Thank you. With new contracts, each time you rotate, you should have a new contract. So if you're starting in one trust in your F1, you'll have a contract for that. And then if you're in another trust for F2, you'll get a new contract with them. Sometimes you can have an overall employing trust, and so you'll just end up with one contract for that, but you should expect a new contract if you're going to be working with a new trust. Thank you. And so each time you do that, you get a job description of exactly what the post entails and what the hours are. And that should tell you a little bit about the rota as well and the duties of the job. The contract states that you should get that at least 6 weeks prior to starting your post, but it is always late, and that's not a good thing. We should be reporting this back to our junior doctors forum at our hospital, to the BMA, because we're meeting our contractual obligations, but our employer doesn't always meet theirs. So there's been plenty of occasions where I've not had my job description, my work schedule, my rota 6 weeks before starting a post. So yep, carry on. So we do have notice periods if we want to terminate our contract, which is just here on the side. So for us, pretty much until you reach after core training, it's a month's notice period. And then from registrar onwards, it's 3 months. Next. And there are some variations, but this mostly applies to registrars, and it shouldn't really apply to us. So, sorry, Hamza. So basically, just giving you an idea that there will be regional variations in contracts, but really the employer should be using the model contract, which I'll show you at the end of the talk. And if there are any variations, they tend to be around the registrar level. So what you can do to make sure that your contract is appropriate is, if you've got friends from med school who've gone to different trusts, send each other or compare your contracts they really should be almost word for word, if not, if not extremely similar. And that's a really good way to identify that your contract is actually following the model contract. Next slide, please. So in our contract now, we should have at least 4 days of paid shadowing at a basic FY1 salary before we start. So this is calculated on a 4-day shadowing period, so 32 hours, so an 8-hour day, and is calculated as a 4/5 of a full 40-hour week of a basic FY1 doctor's pay. So basically, you can calculate it as taking the FY1 basic pay and dividing it by 4/5 for the week, and that should be what you should be paid for this 4-day shadowing period. So pay, so we at FY1, our basic salary is now 29,384 for the basic 40-hour week. And then what happens is, so in the old contract, based on how many weekends and nights and lates that there were, I can give you the slides after. I'll put them up. Weekend and nights, it was based on a banding. So if it was not very busy at all, it was in hours, then the banding would be 1. If it was some weekends, not very frequently, it'd be 1.5. If it was extremely busy, it'd be 2, and that would basically be a multiplier for your banding. On the 2016 contract, we don't have that anymore. What we have is a 37% night premium. So basically, our basic salary is multiplied by 1.37% for the nights that we work. And then for weekends, we get a separate lump sum payment based on the number of weekends that we work. And in terms of pensions, our pensionable salary is the 29,384 per 40-hour week. So the weekend and the night premium aren't actually pensionable. Just a detail, it doesn't actually make a big difference. It's just basically everybody has the same pension contribution on their payslip. The difference with the weekends and the night premium shouldn't impact your pensionable pay. And you can actually have your contract checked by the BMA. And so what lots of people do is they join the BMA for a month, basically when they're starting, send their contract to the BMA checks it out, says it's all legit, and then you just stop being a member of the BMA if you don't want to pay, if you don't want to continue paying. But it's well worth doing if you're worried. But what I will do is show you the model contract at the end. If you didn't want to join the BMA, then the other ways of getting reassurance that your contract is fine is comparing it with friends from other trusts and checking it against the HEE model contract, which I'll show you. And you can do both of those things yourself. They are a bit time consuming to make sure that your contract is legit. Next slide, please. So these are what I meant by the weekend allowances. So if you do 1 in every 2 weekends, then you get 15%. If it goes higher, then you get your increment gets a bit lower. Now remember I remember getting a bit annoyed about this, but basically if you do say 4 or 3 1 in 3 weekends, and then one of your weekends is 1 in 4, you'll get the 7.5% rather than the 10%. And they can be quite cheeky like that, and it is very frustrating, but there's unfortunately nothing we can do about it. So basically, all your weekends have to be a particular number for you to get the higher one. Otherwise, if they manage to squeeze in one where it's in the slightly lower one, they will apply the lower one. So last year when I was in F1, most of my weekends were 1 in 3, and then I had like a couple sprinkled around that were 1 in 4, and I only got 7.5% premium for the weekend rather than 10%. I did query it, and apparently that's what the contract says. So it's annoying, but that's there. And then next slide, please. So enhanced hours is basically any hours that you work from 9 o'clock at night to 7 o'clock in the morning, any day of the week. So we don't actually get paid for weekend hours separately. Wait, so any out of hours is 37%, and then you get a weekend premium as well. And so basically all your nights are paid at a 37% enhancement. And I put specifically here that, so if your night shift starts at earlier than 8, but no later than 11, no earlier than 8 and no later than 11, and is at least 8 hours long, the whole shift will attract 37%. So just because your night shift starts at 8 o'clock, then, and I've said these hours between 9 and 7, doesn't mean you won't be paid the 37% uplift for that hour between 8 and 9. You still will, because the whole shift falls between that 8 o'clock and not starting later than 11 and being 8 hours long. And you will be paid up to working up to 10 o'clock as well. So even though it says 7 o'clock in the contract, if the whole shift works up to 10 o'clock, you'll be paid for that entire shift at 37% uplift. Okay, next slide. So I've had a few questions about the working time directive, the weekly limit of 48 hours. And we were sent the paperwork to sign if we wanted to voluntarily opt out of the working time directive. And I didn't sign it, but there were definitely weeks where I was working more than 48 hours despite not signing it. So, and I, in hindsight, I should have said something about that, and I didn't. And perhaps the right thing to do would have gone to the Guardian of Safe Working and told them that I've not signed the opt-out for the working time directive. And I didn't, and I don't know why I didn't do that, but keep an eye out. If you're really certain that you don't want to opt out of the working time directive, and they do put you on hours that are more than 48 hours a week, do go to your Guardian of Safe Working and let them know, which is what I should have done in hindsight. And to be honest, I think I didn't, because I wasn't that strict about it, and I wasn't that super certain that I wanted to stay opted in. I just didn't want to opt out because I didn't want then a carte blanche to have really silly hours. So yeah, a bit of weirdy, there. Basically, your as long as your average weekly hours are 56 per week, and then you don't work more than 72 hours or 72 hours over a 168-hour period, they can still, that's still a legal rota. So if you opt out of the working time directive, the most they can ask you to work in a 168-hour period is 72 hours. So there's still that limit. It doesn't go to 100-hour weeks or anything like that. There has been plenty of times where I've got to 70 hours, 71 hours, but they've never pushed it to 72. The agreement to opt out is a prior agreement. Like I said, we got paperwork to do it, but I never sent that paperwork back. If you wanted to opt back in, so if you wanted to opt back into the working time directive, you would have to have a notice period, and that notice period is variable between different trusts. So it's not that you could just go straight back into being under 48 hours. If you felt like it, there would be a certain period of time that you would have to give them to do that. There's some questions here, so whilst we're still on this, I'll answer them. What's the benefit of opting out of the working time directive aside from local shifts? Well, it's up to you. It's about a work-life balance, really. The European Working Time Directive is only about your rota. It's not about locum shifts. So you've not said that just because you're opting out of the 48-hour time directive, you can still do locum shifts over, even if you stay within the. So let me start again. You don't have to opt out of the European Working Time Directive to do locum shifts. You can still do them because the European Working Time Directive applies solely to your rota. It doesn't apply to shifts you've chosen to do outside of your rota. So you don't need to opt out to do locum shifts. I hope that makes sense. If you're working more than 48 hours and haven't opted out, are you still getting paid for less than 48 hours? No, so you'll be paid for all the hours that you do. There won't be a case of just because you haven't opted out that you won't be paid for anything outside of 48. You'll still be paid for it. If you don't agree to opt out, does this mean you cannot locum beyond the 48-hour cap? No, you can still locum beyond the 48-hour cap. The European Working Time Directive Agreement only applies to your rota. It doesn't apply to the hours that you do voluntarily. My trust forces you to opt out of the directive to join the locum bank. That is strange. My trust doesn't. So I'm in Oxford and they are fine. I don't know why, and it might be that they're a bit paranoid, that they might get in trouble for letting you do locum shifts. So the thing is, if you're doing a locum shift outside of your rota itself, it shouldn't matter. But I think what your trust might be doing is trying to cover their asses, basically, and make sure that by giving you locum shifts, they are still following whatever rules. But technically, and a lot of the time, a lot of the people running the staff bank or the locum banks and the rota coordinators have never even seen our 2016 junior doctor contract. So technically, you shouldn't have to opt out to do locums, but I think your trust, Chris, might be being a bit paranoid and doing it because of that. Any other questions before I move on? You're welcome. No, okay. Just jot them in. I'll come back to them if need be. Yeah, next slide, please. Quick one. So what is the benefit of opting out? None. Well, for opting out, it just means that you won't be limited to 48 hours a week, I guess, which means that you make more money because you can still make, basically you can work an average of up to 63 hours a week without, they can still rota you for 63 hours a week. So if you opt out, you can get up to that average 68 hours a week, 63 hours a week, and get paid for that. So you can make more money that way. But I don't know, that's why I didn't bother opting out. By 48 hours, is this average weekly or for the whole rota or per week? I haven't opted out and my average weekly is 48, but I have a week where I will be working 63. If you haven't opted out, then I would get in touch with the rota coordinator and tell them that you haven't actually opted out of the 48-hour working time directive, because it applies to per week. So, and if you want them to stick to that, that's the thing, because I didn't opt out. I had plenty of weeks where I went nearly 70 hours. I didn't say anything because I just did them. But if you want to stick to the 48 hours, then I would suggest getting in touch with them and letting them know you haven't opted out. Okay. So breaks. Please take your breaks. It's really hard. I barely take my breaks. I'm so bad at breaks. It's bad. So basically all our breaks are paid, and the reason it's paid is because we're not given protected break times like nurses are. So nurses literally have their protected break times, and then their breaks aren't paid, which is why they're so strict with them, because they don't get paid for those. Our breaks are paid. So you have, if you're in a shift for more than 5 hours but less than 9 hours, then you get 1 30-minute break. If you are over 9 hours but less than 12 hours, then you get a second 30-minute break. And if you're doing a night shift, and that's 12 hours or more, then you get an hour and a half. If you're doing a night shift that's less than 12 hours, then you get the 2 30 minutes. And so that's how the breaks work. You can take the breaks how you want, but we recommend taking them either right in the middle of your shift or spaced between, so that you can make sure you get it. Because the worst thing is when you don't take your breaks and then you basically get to a point where you can't actually take your breaks because it's too late. Are the breaks paid? Yes, they're paid. I heard it was 48 hours on average. Is that not correct? So some weeks you could be doing more and others less. So the rotas can be 48 hours average. The European Working Time Directive specifically is for working no more than 48 hours a week. So the whole purpose is so that you don't have any weeks where you work more than 48 hours. But how it applies to this country, I think we aren't as good at policing it as we should be. if I work in 8 to 5, which is 9 hours, am I entitled to 2 30-minute breaks? Yes, you are. So you're last more than 9 hours. Yes, so you are allowed 2 30-minute breaks. Are the breaks allowed to be consecutive for 1 hour? That depends on your team. So if your team is happy for you to take an hour, then absolutely go for it. It depends on, because a lot of teams either like decide on breaks in advance and are quite coordinated, or otherwise you're sort of kind of running around like headless chickens and you take a break sort of sporadically. So it does depend on how your team does it, but you can take it consecutively as an hour if you want to. What if it's a day shift of 13 hours, 3 breaks or 2 breaks? It is 2 breaks, I'm afraid. You can only have the third break of 30 minutes if it's a night shift, which is a bit annoying. But yeah, I've been there, 13-hour shifts with only 2 30-minute breaks. But unfortunately, the third break is only for the night shift. Any other break ones? Okay, next slide, please. Oh, that was me. Right, that was really quick, actually. So lots of time for questions. Let me actually show you the model contract. So if you stop sharing your screen, Hamza, I will share mine. So bear with me. Can you guys see this Word document? Has that come up?
No, we can't see it yet.
No, let me try this. Oh, there we are. Okay, perfect. Can you see this? Perfect.
Yeah.
I think I can. There we go. Can you guys see that?
Yeah.
Cool. So this is from HEE, Health Education England. It's from their website, and it's a model contract. And so basically what you can do is, if you don't want to join the BMA and get them to check it for you, you can basically download this from the website, and you can compare your contract to this to make sure that there's no weird stuff that they've added into your contract or changed compared to the model contract. So it basically it looks exactly like what your contract would be when you get it, and basically have a look. And this is what it looks like. So this is where all that weekend premiere was, on call availability, work undertaken while you're on call. This is less for us at F1 and more to do with people who are non-resident. London waiting, all of that is in there. So I would suggest getting a hold of this. I will actually, Hamza, whilst we're talking, can you have a look at whether there's a link that you can find?
What's the name for it?
So Health Education England model contract for doctors.
Okay.
Okay, cool. What if we've done that one? Are these breaks including a lunch break or in addition? No, that is your lunch break. Not in addition to. Hamza's going to find us a link of where we can find this, but it's basically Health Education England model contract for doctors. So do you only get 2 breaks during a 9 to 10 13-hour day? Yes, I'm sorry, that is the case. So the third half-an-hour break is only for a night shift. So do you need to take annual leave to present at conferences, or this be part of some sort of separate study leave? Now, in F1, we don't get separate study leave for conferences. So it's either annual leave or it has to be on something called an STT day, which is a self-development time day, which is part of the junior doctor contract. So part of the junior doctor contract, and I should actually have added this in there, so thank you for prompting me, and I will make sure it's in there. STT days are basically, you have to have at least 2 hours a week of self-development time, and that self-development time is spent on things to enhance your portfolio. But sometimes what different trusts like to do is to give you 1 day a month rather than 2 hours a week, because it's a little bit easier doing it that way. So if you have one of those where they've done it on a self-development day, you can ask them to sort of move around your self-development day to accommodate your conference. Or the other thing you can do is you'd have to take annual leave, unfortunately, or you can, at the discretion of your consultant, depending on what the conference is and whether they're sort of amenable to it, they'll just let you go as study leave, and they can do that as a discretionary thing. That's in F1. In F2, we do get study leave. So we get 15 days to we get 20 days, and we can use 5 of those 20 days in F1 to do a taster week. We can't use it to do conferences. We can only use those 5 days to do a taster week, which then leaves us with 15 days in F2. And you can use those 15 days in F2 to attend conferences and courses and things like that. What is the minimum time period before starting post to receive contracts? It should have been 6 weeks to get those. Contract is meant to be 6 weeks before we start work, right? Yes, it is, yeah. We've got I think the link. Thank you so much, Salman. Well done, thank you. Could you briefly outline the major differences between the England and Scotland contract? I am absolutely sorry, I can't. The Scotland contract is the 2002 contract. The only difference I know is about the bandings. So in Scotland, you don't get the weekend premier and the night premier the same way we do. Basically, based on how busy your placement is going to be, a banding is decided, and then you get paid that multiplier of your basic salary. Sick leave is the same. So actually, I will tell you about sick leave. I didn't include that, and I will. So in F1, you can have you can have 1 month of full pay sick leave, and then 1 month of half pay, and then any sick leave after that, and it's calendar month, not month worth of shifts, and any sick leave after that would be unpaid, or it would be statutory sick pay. That's from the HMRC. It's not your employer. In F2, it becomes 2 months of full paid sick leave, and this is both the old 2002 contract and the current 2016 contract. You get 2 months of full sick leave pay, and you get 2 months of half pay, and then the rest is statutory sick pay. And then it goes all the way up to 5 years of service, and from 6 years onwards, everybody gets 6 months of full pay and 6 months of half pay before it's statutory sick pay, and it doesn't go more than 6 months. Are breaks paid for a locum shift? It does entirely depend on the trust and the department. So for example, in my trust, if you did a locum shift in ortho, our breaks would not be paid. But if you did a locum shift in A&E, our breaks would be paid. So it's how the department has decided to do its breaks. And you should definitely ask depending on which one you're doing. When I did ortho, my breaks weren't paid. What are self-development days intended for? How is this enforced? Enforced is a bit strong. Basically, you use the self-development days to work on your e-portfolio on Horus. You use it to attend conferences if you want to. You can do reflections. You can watch e-learning online and log those hours. It's not supposed to be used for mandatory Statman training. That's a key thing. So it's not meant for you to use to do your fire safety, information governance, all of that. It's if they don't give you enough time to do that and tell you to do it in your STT days, that's not right. That STT day is specifically for enhancing and adding to your Horus e-portfolio. Does the STT apply for exams as well? Luciana, could you please clarify what you mean by that question for me? How many days are you allowed to be ill without passing F1? Okay, that's a good one. So you're allowed 20 days of sick leave without any repercussions. So they will automatically just, as long as you've met all the other criteria, they will give you a pass. You're fine. If you go over, say 21 days, then it will be reviewed in more detail. And if you have met all your your foundation competencies, you've got a really good portfolio, it can go up to 25 days, and they can use their discretion and say, this person, even though they had 5 extra days of sick leave, they've still more than met their foundation competencies, so they shouldn't have to have additional time in training. But it basically 20 days is the limit before it starts to get reviewed. So keep that in mind. Are locum shifts only applicable for F2 onwards? Thanks for answering the previous. No, they're not. You can do them in F1 as long as you're only allowed to do locum shifts in a place that you have worked in before, not physical place. So basically, if you've done a gen surge placement, you can then do a locum shift in gen surge. If you've done a resp placement, you can do a locum shift in resp. So you have to have done the placement to be able to do a locum shift in F1. In F2, you can basically locum anywhere, but it depends how easy, difficult it will be. So for example, if I was asked to locum in F2 and it's in a placement I've not done before, like ENT, I would be allowed to locum there, but I wouldn't feel very confident doing it, but that's up to me. It's not that I can't. Can you please repeat the sick days? So 20 days of sick leave in the year without having your F1 affected. Anything more than 20 days will be reviewed. Anything quite significant, so we're talking like, I would personally say 25 days onwards, they might ask you to do a few extra shifts. Sick leave and paid sick leave. So in F1, you have 1 month of full pay, which is a calendar month, not a month's worth of shifts. And then a second calendar month of half pay. And then after that, it's statutory sick pay. F2 is 2 months of full pay, 2 months of half pay, and then statutory sick pay, going all the way up to 6 months of full pay, 6 months of half pay. And that's the maximum anybody gets. If you're doing an SFP and have taught university days in F1, do you take these days off as annual leave or study days? So if you're doing an SFP and part of that SFP is you have to have these university days in F1, and that is part of your SFP, then you don't have to take extra days for it. That should be rotated in for you. That should be part of your rota. You shouldn't have to take extra days for that. Does the sick leave of 1 month extend your training? So I actually did take sick leave of 1 month at the end of my F1, so basically into the beginning of my F2. And I was really worried that it would, so it amounted to 21 days in total because it only counted the 5 weekdays. It doesn't count all 7 days. So it was 21 days in total, and they didn't ask me to do any extending on my training, even though I was super paranoid that they will. And I was really worried that they would, but like with the portfolio, as long as you've met all the competencies, having extended training just because you were sick is not going to make any difference to what your competencies. If they feel that you've not met the competencies, then they would extend the training. Is it 2 hours a week for self-development days? Is it paid? Is it on-site? Is it off-site? So it is paid. It is 2 hours a week. And it's either, so it was really based on the trust, actually. So our trust in Buckinghamshire said that you have to be at least 20 minutes away from the hospital. So if you wanted to do it off-site, you couldn't use your SDT day to then like make your annual leave longer and then be in like America or something. Because if they needed you to come in like at short notice, they can ask you to do that. And so it would be frowned upon if you're in America instead of 20 minutes away from the site. So that's how they policed hours. But different places do it in different ways. So at the moment, I get 2 hours a week, and I have to be on site for that because it is in the middle of my clinics. So yeah, different places do it in different ways. Someone asked earlier if they got 2 breaks for a 9-hour shift, but it said a shift over 9 hours gets 2 breaks. So does one exactly on the dot of 9 hours get 2? I have taken 2 on 9-hour shifts, so I hope so.
Just about to add for the self-development time, as you said, in different trusts it works differently. So, for instance, at my trust, it is a mixture of in-person teaching or online teaching. So if it's in-person teaching, you need to be at the site. But if it's online for us, there's no restriction. So you could be at home. And usually we get half the day off because 2 hours usually amounts to going to work up till 12 o'clock and then having the rest of the afternoon off. So a lot of the time people are following it from home, or if it's more relevant in F2 when you're in community placements, then you get the link. So you don't even have in-person teaching for us. But that's just of my trust.
Yeah. MRCS exams in SDT. So if you manage to get one of your SDT days to be on your MRCS date, then great. You can use it for that. You can use it for studying for that as well. So if they ask you, what did you do on X SDT day? I studied for my MRCS exam. That's perfectly reasonable. So you should be allowed to do that. Should SDT days be included in the rota? Yes, they should. And a lot of the time, they do just automatically put them in there. And there have been some brief times where they've forgotten, but you just need to let them know. For life-changing events where it is supposed to be mandatory for a trust to give you leave if you give 6 weeks notice, who would you escalate to? If your rota coordinator refuses, or in general, who should be escalated to? Right. Let me tell you a fun story, Christopher Barrett. I applied several months before starting so I knew exactly which rotation I was on, exactly which hospital I was on in February before I started. And in February, I got in touch with the right people to let them know I was getting married in August. And I told them exactly the dates I was getting married and that I wouldn't be there. And they did not give me the annual leave on my wedding day. And a week before my wedding day, they said, we're not giving you the annual leave. And I said, I'm not going to be there. So that's it, really. And they didn't argue with me more or escalate it because they knew they were in the wrong, that I had given them more than 6 weeks notice, and they were just trying to bully me into coming in because they thought I wouldn't fight back. I just didn't turn up because I had given them enough notice, and it was my fucking wedding day.
As you should.
Yeah. So in response to your question, escalate. And you, if the rota coordinator refuses, you should have a foundation coordinator. So both trusts I worked at, Buckinghamshire and Oxfordshire, have a foundation coordinator who basically does all of our foundation stuff. So she looks after us in terms of our education, our development, our ARCP. So that person is someone you can escalate to. You can talk to your educational supervisor. You can talk to the guardian of safe working. You can talk to medical staffing if you need to, which is HR. But escalate, or don't turn up. But that it's happened. It's happened to me, and they are quite cheeky. And being quite frank, I think being rota coordinator is horrible. I just think it's such a horrible job. And in Gen Surge, in my F1, we went through 4 different rota coordinators in my 4-month placement. At one point, one rota coordinator lasted 48 hours before she decided this was bollocks and just didn't come back. So I think it's a hard job for everybody, but stand up for yourself.
The reason they might not allow annual leave is usually because if there's not enough people on the ward. But that having been said, as Cyra said, if you've applied 6 weeks before, it's their responsibility to find adequate cover for it.
Yeah, so they need to find locums. They can't say, oh, you've applied 6 weeks before, but we don't actually have enough on the day. No, it's their job to find locums. And actually what I found was in my surgical specialties, they really argued. In my medical specialty and my A&E, they went, cool, no worries, not problem, we'll sort locums out. And I think it's because they really struggle to get locums in surgical specialties. So they try not to. Let's see. So I hope that answers your question. Are the 15 study days per annum paid? Yes, they are. These are your F2 ones, I hope you mean, because your F1 ones, you're only allowed 5 days for a taster week and then no other study leave in F1. Do you need some sort of sick leave to claim it? Claim what? Just let me know what you mean, Linda. Is this sick days without doctor's note right? You can self-certify for 7 days. So the first 7 days can be self-certified. After that, you will need a sick note. And that is what we tell our patients as well when they want sick notes. So yeah, first 7 days you can self-certify. After that, you will need a sick note.
But that's 7 consecutive days. So let's say if you take 3 days in 1 week and then next week you take 2 days, you don't need a sick note for that.
Yeah, absolutely right. Are there any specialties you can't locum in as an F1? As long as you have done the specialty and worked in the specialty, you can locum in it. maybe just me, but not sure what one calendar month, not 1 month worth of shifts mean. So basically, say you had, what's the best way to explain this? So say you had 3 12-hour shifts or 3 13-hour shifts a week. So you ended up doing 3 long days every week, which one of my friends does on Obs and Gynae at the moment. You wouldn't then get a month of, so say like 3 and then 3 and then 3. So you wouldn't add the shifts together to create like how long your sick leave was, because if you did 28 days or of her shifts, then that would extend your sick leave to whatever. Does that make sense? So basically you're allowed 28 calendar days or whatever the number is of a month, right? So if you're working 3 days a week, you can't say, well, for those 3 days, those 3 days, those 3 days, you know, you'll end up having more than a month off, if that makes sense, because you'll be only working 3 days of the entire week. Does that make sense, Hamza? I'm not doing very good.
It makes sense. So I mean,
Yeah.
it just counts for the whole month, excluding. I mean, yeah, including the days you're not working as well
Yes.
for a
Yeah.
month. Yeah.
Rather than basing it on the shifts that you're missing.
The number of days or
Yeah.
number of days you're working. Yeah.
Yeah. So you can't. It's not. I missed. You can't be off sick for 28 shifts and say it's not 28 shifts, because that would be much longer depending on how you do your shifts. It would be a calendar month. How many in weeks in advance should your rota be sent? 6 weeks. Sorry if I missed this. What does STT stand? So it's self-development days. Sorry, so it's so Sierra Delta Tomato. SDT, self-development days, is what it stands for. Yeah, I agree. Are SDTs bleep free if on site? Yes. Yes, they are. You shouldn't be rotated in to do any actual work. But that being said, if someone leaves a bleep with you and fucks off, then that happens as well. So, you know.
At my trust, just to jump in, Kyra, it
Yeah.
depends if you're on call. If you're on call, usually you don't get the self-development time. Or if you have the time to go, you can go, but you have to carry your bleep. But
Yeah.
being on call on a self-development time doesn't happen a lot, maybe once a month or once every 2 months.
Yeah, and it's usually because you're doing someone a favor rather than like they won't rota you in to be on call whilst you're doing self-development time. But if someone says, "Oh, could you just cover me?" I know Andrew Zhao. We went to school together. How many days standard do we get for annual leave? So we get 9 days of annual leave per 4-month period. Bollocks, isn't it? So basically, we get 27 days annual leave a year, but we're only allowed. So it's split across our placements. So we're only allowed to, if you have if you have 3 4-month placements, it's split across that, and you're only allowed to take 9 days per placement. If you do 4 3-month placements, then that's split across those. God knows how. And then if you do 2 6-month placements, then it's split in half between those. You can't take all 27 days together. And then if you have a rota where you work bank holidays, then you take a bank holidays at a different time as well. So you will probably be rotated on a bank holiday if you're doing medicine or surgery. And so GP, GUM, for example, they're all off on bank holidays. But yeah, that's part of your annual leave.
We have another question from Emanuela. She's asked, can you repeat the kind things you should and shouldn't be doing on self-development days?
So they will tell you, but basically, on self-development days, you should not be doing statutory mandatory training. So if they tell you, please use that time to meet your statutory training needs, so your fire safety, information governance, safeguarding, they should be giving you separate time to do that during your induction. That should not be done in your self-development time. Your self-development time is basically development time for your clinical practice, and then you really have a lot of freedom of what you can do otherwise. So you can do mind the bleep e-learning videos. You can catch up on the actual core teaching that they do if you've missed it. You can go on a conference. You can come in. I actually, because I intended to do surgery a while ago and changed my mind, I spent a lot of my self-development days actually going into theatre and getting my operating numbers and getting my hours. And you can do that. So yeah, there's lots of options actually. It's for your benefit. You shouldn't be doing Statman training. You should be using it for you.
Yeah, you can do anything. You can go for a walk in the park. Or
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you're gonna have to justify it, but yeah.
I mean, it's just a way of them showing that they've slotted in time for you to work on your portfolio. You
Yeah.
don't need to be actively working on your portfolio at that time. You could do it, let's say, on the weekend or something or like that. But yeah.
I had one placement in rheumatology where my consultant was really anal about, like, she policed my SDT days hard. Like, she wanted to know exactly what I'd done on them. So and if I decided I was going to not do it on that day and do it on a different day, I had to let her know in advance.
Wow.
So like most people, absolutely, like 99%, I'd say don't give a balls, but for me, just happened to get that 1%, I think.
My go-to excuse was always, I'm working on my quality improvement project, which you have to do for F1.
Yeah.
So you
And
have
that's a legitimate use of your time.
Yeah.
Or studying for MRCS, MRCP, that's a legitimate use. All of that. No worries. How many days standard do we get for annual leave? 27. 9 days per rotation, depending on if you have the 4-month ones or the 3-month ones or the 6-month ones. What can you do if your trust hasn't sent your rota 6 weeks in advance? Contact the BMA, as long as you're a BMA member. If you're not a BMA member, I would suggest contacting medical staffing and saying that you haven't received your rota. And if you can find the details of the Junior Doctor Forum representative for F1, you can let them know as well. Does a friend, family, wedding class as a significant life event as long as it's 6 weeks in advance? Yes, it does. After how many days on call are you given a rest day? So you're not allowed to work more than how many days? You can work 7 days in a row before you get a rest day. They can rota you in for 7 days in a row.
But I think it depends after being on call or on a night shift. Is it mandatory to have 48 hours after a night shift rest day?
Before you come in for a day shift, yeah. Would MRCS have to be taken as annual leave? So if you were doing the MRCS exam and you can somehow fit it into your STT day, whichever they've rotated in for you, then good for you. Otherwise, if you're doing it in F1, it would have to be annual leave. If you're doing it in F2, you can take study leave for that.
This webinar will also be available on YouTube, the Mind of Leave channel.
Which shift types are we able to request annual leave on? This really hurt me. So in ortho, we had so many different shift types. We had normal days, which were 8 to 5, and then we had 12 to 8s, and then we had 8 to 8s. So we had so many different shifts, and the only shifts we were allowed to take annual leave on was 8 to 5s. All the other shifts we weren't allowed to take annual leave on. But what we could do is swap. If, say, we wanted a week off, but we were on 12 to 8 for that one, then we could swap with someone who was on 8 to 5. Our friend would do our 12 to 8s for us, and we'd take the annual leave on the 8 to 5. So you can do that. But it was a pain. If you are off sick overnight shift, is it 1 or 2 days? 1 day. Can you locum in a different city to the trust you're working in, and what platform would you find locum jobs on? Check out Messley, not the place for here, not here. How do you have to let your rota coordinator know if you switch shifts with your colleagues? Absolutely, yes. They absolutely need to know. Basically because of rota, making sure that there's no rota gaps. And they absolutely need to know. And it would look really bad, and I'm sure you'd never do it to each other, but say like you didn't tell them that you were swapping shifts and then your friend didn't turn up, it would look really bad on you. So tell them. Is a video being released? Yes. How much are the MRCP exams? Have a look on RCS.
They're expensive, at least 600 pounds, I think.
Yeah, 550 MRCS. I don't know what MRCP is. What is mandatory as an F1 FY other than doing equip? So you can actually look at your trust's FY1 requirements on their website. So their website should be able to tell you exactly what you need to do. But you need, so our trust gave us X number of tickets that we needed to get signed off. So we needed to get like certain number of mini caxes, certain number of case-based discussions, etc. We had to get a placement supervision group. We had to get a tab or team assessment of behavior, and we had to get a quip, for example. So different trusts will have different requirements, but their induction should tell you exactly what your requirements are.
And
then, yeah, go on.
Oh no, sorry, Kyra, you go ahead.
They don't really vary too much between trust to trust. Ours, like Buckinghamshire, decided that we should do double everything just in case. You don't have to do ALS as an F2 anymore. It's not mandatory, and that's across the country. But you do need to do ILS, which your trust will organise for you.
That's interesting, yeah. And you have to have had passed the PSA
Yes.
by the end of F1. But we'll have a session on the portfolio. So, as Kyra said, there's some things you'll get to know in time, but we'll also have a session covering this in detail.
Sick leave doesn't eat into annual leave. Are significant life events counted as vacation days? Depend what the life event is. If it's someone's wedding, then yes. If it's someone's funeral, then hopefully they'll be nice about it. They're not, by the way. They actually sometimes tell you can't go to funerals, which is really shit, frankly. But that has happened, especially because funerals don't give you the same 6 weeks notice that, weddings do. And it does depend on your department. So like my current department is lovely, and if I said next week I have XYZ funeral, they'd be really accommodating. Whereas I have been in departments where they have not been accommodating, and they don't have to be. What is the minimum rest period when transitioning from night to day shift? It's 11 hours.
I think it's 72 hours. But we have it on the Mind the Bleep survival guide, if you check that out.
Okay. I don't know about, so the question here is, do you get extra days for significant life events, or is it still 9 days of annual leave for that block? It depends on the life event. And it depends on the department, how they want you to take it. If rota means you work on a bank holiday, do you get the day in lieu? Yes, you do. Do you get the day off for taking the PSA? No, I don't think you do. You have to take that off as annual leave, unfortunately. How would you recommend? I don't think you do. You need PSA before you start F1, or at least by the end of F1?
At least by the end of F1.
Okay, yeah. So that would have to be annual leave.
I mean, it depends on where you're working as well. Like some departments might be nice enough, give you study days off, or even a few more days extra to study for it. Try see with your department.
Yeah, it's so variable. It's so variable. How would you recommend transitioning between trusts? Oh, mate, you have so there have been times where I have finished on a night shift on one trust and had to come in for the day for the next one. And because the trusts don't have to respect the rota between each other, because it's a completely separate rota. So, and even departments don't have to trust the rota between each other. So say you finish in a surgical one on a night shift, your next rota coordinator doesn't have to respect your first rota coordinator. It's not great. And then the moving bit is just ridiculous. It is really difficult, frankly, and I think it would just be a case of planning. You'd have to do planning, and you would have to contact, it is a FAF, and contact the new trust to let them know that you're finishing on a night. Is there anything they can do to accommodate that? Can they do a induction a little bit later, or with the trust that you're finishing with, can they move you off that night shift? Something. It's really not great the way it's done, but unfortunately it's on you to try and do something about it.
Although it's worth letting them know if you're finishing a night shift on one rota and then you're scheduled in for the next day. They might be nice enough
Yeah.
to help you out, but as Kyra said, they're not obligated to do it.
No. Do trusts normally cover costs for ILS? Yes, they do. They have just been asked to pay for mine. They shouldn't have. No.
You'll have advanced life support, and as Kyra said, in F1, you don't get any money for study leave. The only exception is advanced life support, which your trust should pay for.
Yeah. No, you shouldn't. You shouldn't be paying for that. And I don't know if they're saying that you should pay for it and then reclaim it from them. So just query that. If I no, they should cover the cost for that. If you're rotated to work on a bank holiday, do you need to tell your rota coordinator in order to get the day back in lieu? Yes, you do. And you'd be applying for that in the same way you'd be applying for annual leave. I've done ILS, but Trust is asking for ALS too. They should be paying for that ALS if it's a mandatory requirement. So if they want you to do ALS, ask them, are they funding it, and how are they going? Are you supposed to get it done by an external place and then claim it back from them, or do they supply it in-house? But nationally, ALS is not an F2 requirement.
So do you think that could have changed now, Kyra? Because it's not a requirement. Do you think they have to pay for it? It was a
I
requirement
didn't have to
for
pay.
us. Yeah. I think it was a requirement for us. That's why they might have paid. But yeah.
Yeah.
But ILS,
Because it's not because it's not a requirement. So Daniel's saying about ILS that he had to pay for it.
yeah, they should pay for the ILS.
They should pay for ILS.
Yeah.
ALS is no longer a requirement. Pills does not get covered unless your department agrees to pay for it.
Yeah.
And it'll highly likely be covered in your study budget in F2. It will actually 100% be covered in your study budget in F2. Where can you book ALS? You'd have to look online for that. So my trust does in-house ALS, so that's how I did it. But you have to look online on the Research Council website to find where they are running him.
Most of us will do it. So it's worth speaking to your clinical, educational clinical that run simulation. They might have slots scheduled in a few months' time and book you in for it.
Yeah. Do you get paid more for working on a bank holiday? Nope. Jeremy Hunt very kindly made sure that every day in the week is paid the same. So no. You don't get paid more. I've heard that Trust can reimburse you for moving. Is that true? Yes, they can. So you get relocation costs. And so you look on the Trust's website for relocation costs. And if you're moving from rented accommodation to rented accommodation, there's an £800 limit to what you can reclaim. And you can basically reclaim the cost of movers. So you can get someone to move the stuff for you, and you can reclaim the cost for 3 journeys to the new place to find a place. You can't reclaim the cost of rent. You can't reclaim the cost of the deposit or anything like that. If you're moving from rented to rented, you can claim the cost of up to 800. If you're moving from bought to bought, then there are a few more things you can claim for, and it's a bit higher. So you can claim for things like, I don't know because I've not actually done it, but I think I did a webinar on this. But basically you can look at relocation costs for doctors, and most people would be moving from either their family's home to rented accommodation, from rented to rented, or from rented to bought. And all of those, there's a limit of £800. Oh no, it's 800. It is 800 because I claim more. What have you, Hamza? What is it for you?
I mean, I know it's £10,000 for the
Yeah.
whole of your career, but £700, it's my trust.
Yeah. Okay, so I think you're right. It might differ between trusts because you got 700, mine's 800. And if you're a medic couple as well, you can combine yours.
Again, check Cyra, check the Mindably page, the finance section. Cyra has written loads of articles on it. She probably has videos on it as well. She's gone into detail about it.
Thank you. ALS is a mandatory requirement for them. That's odd. But are they willing to pay for it? They should be, if it's a mandatory requirement.
It's mandatory, they should pay for it.
Yeah. Can you claim for moving to your first F1 accommodation, or is it only relocation within your placement? Yeah, no, you can claim for moving to your first F1 accommodation. And can you claim for van hire, or has to be... No, you can claim for van hire. Find out, they should pay for it. If ALS is a mandatory requirement, they should pay for it. What if you are moving from abroad? Does it apply or only applies once you're in the UK? That's a really good question, and I do think it applies to UK only.
Any more questions from the audience?
This is why I make my presentation super short, because like it's all the meaty stuff's here.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting topic. That's why we have loads of questions. What would you claim if you've moved from a rented at uni, then stayed at your parents' home before starting your foundation job? From rented to rent or bought to rented?
It would be the van hire moving costs.
Could you claim for rent on a monthly basis? Because I know of people who did that.
I don't know. I didn't think you could.
So,
what were they able to claim that? Do you know?
yeah, so I had a discussion with like someone from the HR department of my hospital. I mean, I wasn't eligible to claim for it, but they said the requirement was if you have property on your name, or
yes.
or
So
if you
basically, you're right. So if you own a property and you're still paying the mortgage on that property, then if you have to move somewhere for work in the UK as part of your training, and you have to pay rent in that new place, you can claim the rental costs for that. But you have to be still paying a mortgage.
Yeah.
The whole reason they're doing it is so you don't get hit twice.
Yeah. Or if you're renting somewhere, let's say if you have like a family and stuff, and you're paying their rent, let's say in London, and you have to move outside London to pay for your accommodation, then you can claim for that. So if you're paying rent twice, you can claim for relocation costs as well.
Yeah. So you can get the rental costs, the moving costs from moving to your parents' house to the new rented accommodation. Your trust will have a website which will explain relocation costs and how to claim. They'll give you an email address of who to contact, and there'll be a form and everything, and it's on a trust by trust basis.
How do you claim for rent expense of movement? So as Cyra said, find this person in charge. They'll send you a form and some details to fill out and send it back to them. Great. I think that's all the questions we have, Cyra. I'll just post a link for the feedback form as well. It'd be great if you guys could fill that out, just to know, to get some feedback from you guys.
Can I claim reimbursement costs for relocation on my parents' behalf if I live with them and they move with me to the workplace? So as long as the way you submit it is legitimately for moving from one place to another, if that makes sense. So you can't say like we needed 2 moving vans to move to 2 different addresses, if that makes sense. You can only claim for one of those. Obviously claim for the higher one because you have to submit receipts. But you can't claim for 2 separate moving costs. I hope that makes sense.
I think he meant about claiming for his parents coming to help him move as well. I don't think you can do that.
Oh yeah, if it's one address, just claim it.
Is there something like a rollover rota or days? I'm not sure. Are you aware of a rollover rota?
I've never heard of that, sorry.
Yeah, no, I don't think you can claim on behalf of your parents. You can only claim for yourself for the relocation cost.
But if you're moving with them, that's you.
Mhm.
So you can still claim for that. So say I was starting as it. So okay, say I was starting work in Oxford. I already lived in Oxford, and my parents are now moving to Oxford to be closer to me. I couldn't claim for them. But say I was moving to Oxford to start working and I lived in Coventry with my parents, and all of us are moving together to Oxford, then I will be able to claim for that because I'm moving.
If your friends are moving together, can you both claim for relocation costs? Or can you only claim for one person?
So if you're, for example, sharing a moving van, then you would only one of you will be able to claim because you'd have the one receipt, or you would split it in half and claim both of you claim half of the costs. You can do it that way, but you both can't put a full claim in.
And as long as your friend is also working at that trust.
Yeah.
So I've posted the link for the feedback form. On filling the feedback form, you'll get a certificate for attending this session as well, which can be helpful for the future.
Okay, shall we wrap it up?
Yeah, Kyra has another session coming up. I think it's
It's
isn't
next
it?
Wednesday, I think. Is
Yeah,
it?
next
Yeah.
Wednesday. So, and she'll be covering like other stuff as well. So, what will you be covering, Kyra? It'll be like tips
So
about.
I think next Wednesday is general finance tips for people who are leaving med school and starting F1.
Yeah, so that's really interesting, like about budgeting,
Yeah.
uh, and all those stuff. But also check out her articles on the Mind the Bleed page. And thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Kyra.
No problem. Thank you for having me. I really hope I was able to answer your questions, everybody. Again, like we said, I'm going to be here next week, and I'm also going to be here. I'll be doing one more at the end of August for payslips, and I'll be explaining exactly what is on your payslip and what to look for and how to make sure you've got the correct tax code and everything. So lots of opportunities to ask me questions.
Thank you. Bye.
No problem. Bye.